Question. Hi Kim. Thank you for your profound and inspiring work. I have a question. Is it possible for someone to ascend without being aware of the existence of the ascended masters? In other words, could a person reach the 144th level without directly connecting with them? Or is the path to the ascension only possible through their guidance and teachings? Thank you for your time and insight. Okay, so this is a little bit tricky to answer because we often get so hung up on words. So let me put it this way. If you look at the Christian religion, many Christians believe you can only be saved through Jesus. He is the Savior, the only Son of God. And you can only be saved because He took embodiment and His blood was spilled on the cross, and only you can be, that's the only way you can be saved. This leaves a question that most Christians don't even think about. Does that mean that until Jesus embodied on earth 2,000 years ago, nobody was saved? Meaning, for example, Abraham. Abraham couldn't have been saved because Jesus hadn't embodied. So what happened to Abraham? And Moses and all the others, right? So the logical conclusion to this is that it was possible for people to be saved before Jesus took embodiment. That's why he, for example, could meet with, on the Mount of Transfiguration, he met with Elijah and Elisha, whoever it was, two ascended beings who appeared to the disciples. And so all I'm saying here is, for all the time the earth has existed, there have been people who ascended. And they didn't use the word ascended masters. Because for a long time, because of the unnatural state of earth, the low level of collective consciousness, the ascended masters weren't allowed to make their presence known in a public way. So it was only within the last little over around a century that they have used that terminology, ascended masters. Now, of course, so what I'm trying to say here is, there are many people who have ascended without using the word ascended masters or knowing the word ascended masters. But the deeper aspect of the question is that, could a person reach the 144th level without directly connecting with the ascended masters? Is the path to the ascension only possible through their guidance and teachings? And the answer to that question is no and yes. In other words, you can't reach the 144th level without directly connecting to the ascended masters. The path to the ascension is only possible through their guidance and teachings. Why? Because, as I explained in my video about how the world was created, our material world that we live in was created out of the beings of the ascended masters. We are extensions of the beings of the ascended masters. The purpose of this unascended sphere, and I explained that in how the world was created, we are in an unascended sphere, because we can outplay free will, meaning we have the option to go into separation where we believe we are separate beings, where we can deny God, we can deny ascended masters, because we think we are independent beings, that we just have an independent existence. In reality, nothing is independent of the ascended masters, or God, ultimately. But everything in our world is created out of the beings of the ascended masters. So the only way to rise up and qualify for your ascension is through the lineage of the ascended masters, through the connection to the ascended masters leading to oneness with the ascended masters. It's the only way it can be done. Okay? So you cannot, I've explained there are 144 levels of consciousness possible on earth, from the most selfish to the most unselfish. And you cannot reach the higher levels of consciousness without connecting to ascended masters. But again, you may not call them ascended masters. You may not see them as ascended masters, but you are connecting to their beings, whatever you call them. And the reason for this is very simple. As I said, 144 levels of consciousness, the lowest level, the most selfish, self-centered, the highest level, the least selfish, the least self-centered. What does that mean to be less self-centered? It means you are connecting, you are experiencing that there's a reality outside your own mind. So I've explained. We have the outer mind, and the core of our being is the conscious you, which has created the contents of the outer mind, the 4 levels, identity, mental, emotional. But we haven't become it. So the only way we can grow spiritually is the conscious you, once in a while, steps outside the contents of the outer mind and realizes it's more than the outer mind. And when you step outside, you're doing this by connecting. You may not know consciously what you're connecting to. Your higher self, the ascended masters. You may not be aware of this, but you are connecting to something. And so the most selfish people are the people where the conscious you is completely identified with the contents of the mind, the outer mind. That's why they can be at the lowest state of consciousness. As you rise to higher levels, you're beginning to connect to, you're beginning to experience there's something outside the contents of the outer mind. There is more to you than the self that you have in the outer mind. That's how you become less selfish, less self-centered, less self-focused. Only by connecting to something outside the contents of your mind. And only when you have that connection can you question the contents of your mind and come to see that they're actually all illusions. They're all illusions. And you can put it this way. You can say the underlying reality is that all life is one. Most people don't see this because they have built layers of illusion, a veil, a maya, as the Buddha would say it, that hides the reality that all life is one. This is what makes it possible for people to experience that they are separate beings. And it's an experience you can have with free will, as I've explained. So, as you rise towards the 144th level of consciousness, you're beginning to question all these illusions, which means the veil becomes thinner and thinner. And the thinner the veil becomes, the more you begin to experience the underlying reality of oneness. Oneness with what is beyond the matter realm, which is the ascended masters, your higher self, ultimately the creator. It's just the only way it can be done. You cannot be a separate being, see yourself as a separate being, and ascend. And you can only avoid being a separate being, you can only overcome the illusion that you are a separate being by connecting to the reality of oneness. And that is the ascended masters, whether you call them that or something else.